What's up, guys? Welcome to the Wolf of Young podcast. My name is Victor. I'm your host. Donald Trump just recently, yesterday, gave an interview to the National Association of Black Journalists in Chicago, Illinois. And let's just say the fallout from that has been crazy. But if you're like me and you have a certain disdain for what mainstream media has turned into, I want to listen to this interview with my own ears and draw my own conclusions on what was said during this interview. So, you guys, what we're gonna do today. I'm gonna play the interview, and I'll definitely be interjecting in the middle, and giving my opinions on some of the points that were made. But this is I what I'm hoping for this to be is to be an unbiased analysis of what former President Trump said. So let's get started. It's a longer interview, so there's not much time for us to dally around. So let's go, guys.
Let's bring out the former president of the United States, the Republican nominee for president, former President Donald Trump.
Okay. All right. I'm gonna skip us a lot of the feel good material and probably get so that we can get to the meat of the talk here.
In the room, sir. A lot of people did not think it was appropriate for you to be here today. You have pushed false claims about some of your rivals, from Nikki Haley to former President Barack Obama, saying that they were not born in the United States, which is not true. You have told 4 congresswomen of color who were American citizens to go back to where they came from. You have used words like animal and rabbit to describe Black district attorneys. You've attacked Black journalists, calling them a loser, saying the questions that they ask are, quote, stupid and racist. You've had dinner with a white supremacist at your Mar-a-Lago resort. So my question, sir, now that you are asking Black supporters to vote for you, why should Black voters trust you after you have used language like that?
Wow. Before we go on to the way President Trump has replied this, I gotta say this is probably the most unprofessional start to like an interview I've ever seen. Like this particular journalist, Rachel Scott, I see is her name. She's from ABC. Like the aggression to start this interview, I thought was kind of rude, and you and I thought it was uncalled for, but you could tell from the start that she had an agenda. But it is what it is. Benefit of the doubt and all that. Let's listen to what President Trump replied.
First of all, I don't think I've ever been asked a question so in such a horrible manner. First question. You don't even say, hello, how are you? Are you with ABC? Because I think they're a fake news network, a terrible network. And
fucking Trump.
I think it's disgraceful that I came here in good spirit. I love the Black population of this country. I've done so much for the Black population of this country, including employment, including opportunity zones with Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina, which is one of the greatest programs ever for Black workers and Black entrepreneurs. I've done so much. And, and I say this, historically, Black colleges and universities were out of money. They were stone cold broke. And I saved them and I gave them long-term financing, and nobody else was doing it. I think it's a very rude introduction. I don't know exactly why you would do something like that. And let me go a step further. I was invited here and I was told my opponent, whether it was Biden or Kamala, I was told my opponent was going to be here. It turned out my opponent isn't here. You invited me under false pretense. And then you said, you can't do it with Zoom. Well, where's Zoom? She's going to do it with Zoom and she's not coming. And then you were half an hour late, just so we understand. I have too much respect for you to be late. They couldn't get their equipment working or something
Mr.
was
President,
wrong.
I would love.
Okay, so I think someone needs to tell President Trump about African time. You get, I know I'm joking here, but you get invited to an African American event and you expect them to be on time. No, I'm joking. I can say that because I'm African, but all jokes aside, I thought this was kind of an aggressive start. In terms of, but let's fact check. We're here to actually analyze what President Trump said. He spoke about securing funding for historically black universities and for historically black colleges and universities. And the truth is, uh, with everything with Donald Trump, some of it is exaggerated, but there's actually truth in this. Here's the thing. He did sign the Future Act in 2019, which allocated significant federal funding for HBCUs permanent beyond 2019. However, if you really wanna get deep into the weeds, the HBCUs actually got no more funding, not no more extra funding than they did compared to during the Obama administration. So in terms of so that claim about saving the HBCUs is a little bit exaggerated, but but the truth is he did do quite a lot in terms of funding for HBCUs. Let's proceed.
It's a very nasty question. I have answered the question. I have been the best president for the black population since Abraham Lincoln.
Better than President Johnson, who signed the Voting Rights Act.
For you to start off a question
again, very unprofessional by the journalist to just like interrupt him while he's talking, and just be aggressive. She seemed to be on a mission here. But let's proceed.
Answer period, especially when you're 35 minutes late because you couldn't get your equipment to work in such a hostile manner. I think it's a disgrace.
Let me just ask a follow-up, sir, and then we'll move on to other questions here. Some of your own supporters, including Republicans on Capitol Hill, have labeled Vice President Kamala Harris, who is the first Black and Asian American woman to serve as vice president and be on a major party ticket, as a DEI hire. Is that acceptable language to you? And will you tell those Republicans and those supporters to stop it?
How do you define DEI? Go ahead. How do you define
diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Okay, yeah, go ahead. Is that what your definition?
That is
give me a
literally
definition,
the words.
then. Would you give me a definition of that? Give me a definition.
Sir, I'm asking you a question,
No,
a
you
very
have to
direct
define
question.
it. Define it for me, if you
I
would.
just defined it, sir. Do you believe that Vice President Kamala Harris is only on the ticket because she is a Black woman?
Well, I can say, no, I think it's maybe a little bit different. So I've known her a long time indirectly, not directly very much. And she was always of Indian heritage, and she was only promoting Indian heritage. I didn't know she was Black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn Black, and now she wants to be known as Black. So I don't know, is she Indian or is she Black?
She has always
But you know
identified
what?
as a Black
I
woman.
respect
She
either
went to
one.
college.
I respect either one, but she obviously doesn't, because she was Indian all the way, and then all of a sudden she made a turn, and
Okay, so yeah, he done fucked up. I don't think he should have said that. I don't think he should have said that. This is actually one of those where so in saying that Kamala Harris, Vice President Kamala Harris, has only been promoting her Indian heritage and suddenly turned Black. Hello, this is what resumes are about. Like people put in a sense whatever serves them on their resume, and I think that isn't exactly true when you consider the fact that Vice President Harris actually went to Howard, an historically Black college, but also she was part of the I can't remember what the sorority was called, but it's one of the oldest sororities in while she was at Howard. So she, in truth, does associate with her Black roots. But even if she didn't, here's the thing: she's she definitely can claim Black, because for newsflash, you don't have to be Indian or Black. You can be both, and it just so happens that Kamala Harris is both. Her father is Donald J. Harris, is Jamaican American, Black. So for those of you who don't realize, Jamaican is Black. Anyways, and her mother is Indian. So by definition, and based on family ties, she is Black. Okay, so I think he shouldn't have said that. I don't think that was very very well thought out. But let's proceed.
Became a Black person.
Just to be clear, sir, do you believe
I
that
think
she is
somebody should look into that too when you ask continue in a very hostile, nasty tone.
It's a direct question, sir. Do you believe that Vice President Kamala Harris is a DEI hire, as some
I
Republicans
really don't
have
know.
said?
I mean, I really don't know. Could be. There are some, and there are plenty. I know this lady right over there, Harris, is a fantastic person who just interviewed me at length. And we had a great interview, I think, and I heard you got very good ratings on that.
Well,
interview.
you told me it was the longest one of your life, so we had a good discussion. Look, I want to talk about why you're here today.
Okay, great
I mean,
segue.
it
New
is not
journalist.
lost on us how divided we are as a country. And as you were coming today, we really got to see that we are divided along the lines of race, along the lines of gender. And there is this question of, in this moment where we are, why come here? What is your message today?
My message is to stop people from invading our country that are taking, frankly, a lot of problems with it. But one of the big problems, and a lot of the journalists in the
I wish he would have stopped here. But you're going to see in the next few minutes that he would say something, as Trump tends to do, say something that ruins all the good work that he has just done. Listen up.
I know and I have great respect for. A lot of the journalists in this room are black. I will tell you that coming from the border are millions and millions of people that happen to be taking black jobs. You had the best.
What exactly is a black job, sir?
A black job is anybody that has a job. That's what it is. Anybody that has a job.
All right.
All right. You know, he said this during the debate with President Biden. The first time he mentioned this whole black job thing, and the immigrants coming across the border to take black jobs, I was like, maybe it was a speech tick. Maybe he just says these things. But he goes on to back it up and say it again, which I thought, like, he should have just stopped when he talked about immigration, because that's a strong point. This particular U.S. government has failed on immigration. That is a strong point. I can get behind, making sure that people coming into the country, into the United States, are legal and vetted. He's not wrong. Anyways, proceed.
And
Mr. President,
they're taking the employment away from black people. They're coming in, they're invading. It's an invasion of millions of people, probably 15, 16, 17 million people. I have a feeling it's much more than that. And everybody's been seeing what's happened. The first group of people, the black population, is affected most by that. And Kamala is allowing it to happen. She's the border czar. She's the worst border czar in the history of the world. There's never been a border czar like this. She's never even essentially been. She said she was there once, but not the right part of the border. So she was a border czar. She's done a horrible job. These people are coming into our country and they're taking black jobs and Hispanic jobs.
No.
And frankly, they're taking union jobs. Unions are being very badly affected by all of the millions of people that are pouring into our country. And one thing, as we discussed, many of these people are coming in from mental institutions, from prisons, from jails. They're gang members in other countries. Other countries are setting loose their prisoners. They're opening up their prisons and their mental institutions, and they're taking their bad people, drug dealers, gang members, and they're bringing them into the United States. And by the way, their crime rate is going down, and our crime rate is going to be a disaster.
Mr. President, I want to get into how you address some of the issues with black communities. And I say that plural because we live in communities of color that are different. We're not all the same. We don't vote the same. We don't think the same.
True.
It's not monolithic. So as you come here today, I want to talk about something that bursts. And this is the weight of the inflation on this country right now. The nonprofit Money Management International recently released data from its mid-year analysis that we have found a 52% rise in people who are seeking counseling for being in credit debt. They're paying for food that is sky high on their credit cards, and now they can't pay that off. The credit counseling nonprofit MMI, as I said, is saying now that they've seen surges that they haven't seen since we were in a pandemic of people in financial trouble. Much of that falls on the shoulders of single moms, single Black moms, when you look statistically. Yeah. How do you turn it around? What's your plan for the Black community when it comes to money?
So, first of all, it's very hard to hear you for whatever reason because of the fact that they have bad equipment, because I guess, this woman was unable to get the right equipment. But it's very hard for me to hear you, but I can hear every other word. It's very difficult, actually. But so I don't know if they can fix it or do something with it, but I'll do the best I can with it. The inflation is absolutely destroying our middle class, our working class, virtually every class. Inflation is a disaster in our country. Inflation is a country buster. It breaks every country. And we had, in my opinion, the worst inflation we've had. They say it's 58 years, but I think it's much more than that. It's been devastating. And if you just take a look at a lot of things they don't include, like interest rates. Interest rates went from 2.4% to 10%, and you can't get the money. People can't buy houses. They no longer have the American dream. Young people, young Black people, they don't have the American dream anymore. They can't buy a house. They can't borrow the money because of the cost of the money. They can't buy it because of the cost of housing, because of the cost to build it, because of inflation. Inflation is a disaster, and it's destroying our country. And it's destroying the Black community probably as much or more.
So what do you do?
Than any.
What's your plan?
You know what we have to do? We have to bring down the cost of energy, and that's going to bring down the cost of inflation. This was all started with a bad energy policy by Joe Biden. By the way, just if I might,
Okay.
I was running.
All right. So he's had quite a bit here, and he makes very great points here in terms of, unfortunately, inflation through COVID in a lot of countries in the world, and obviously the US also included, has been sky high. And most people don't understand how COVID directly links to inflation. But here's the thing, right? COVID disrupted supply chains, leading to shortages and price increases. But also the energy price volatility in the wake of the of sort of like reopening after COVID, as the prices of energy has kind of been volatile, which also affects like supply, right? But also the labor market tightness. So this is something that Joe Biden and his administration are very proud of, in the sense that unemployment rate is relatively low at this time. um but what that does is that puts a lot more money in the hands of people, but that also affects the prices of things in the and makes things more expensive to purchase, right? So there are direct links between and while there are causes, but it is a fact that inflation rates are pretty high at the moment. And unfortunately, that obviously that affects everybody's economy. It affects affordability for the common person. He's stating facts here. Okay. And obviously that's the reason for a lot of people's frustration with the Biden administration at the moment, along with immigration, of course.
Against a man named Biden. You probably saw that. And he was losing very badly in the polls. And then he had a rather bad debate. I would say it was a bad debate. I would say it was one of the worst debates in history. And his poll numbers crashed. And instead of saying, let's keep going and maybe something happens the other way, they said, oh, we're going to replace him. Let's just replace him. That's like you're in a fight. A prize fighter's in a fight. He's not doing what you say. Let's bring in another fighter. So our whole campaign was steered toward him. And now we have to steer toward him. But ultimately, it's the same, because they have bad policy. They have policies of open borders, unbelievable open borders, horrible energy policies. They want to get rid of, as you say, gasoline in cars. They want to get rid of oil. They want to get rid of efficient heating.
Mr. President.
Environmentally, what they're doing is killing our country.
Okay, so obviously, the philosophies of the Republicans and the Democrats on energy is quite different. The Republicans believe in, and in Trump's words, drill baby drill, but the Democrats are obviously on the side of sustainability, and on the side of renewable energy, and trying to kind of battle climate change. Okay, obviously, the price of some of the tech that are geared towards like renewable energy, and the price of not drilling in the US is, unfortunately, that affects the economy, because we're still like it's still a country that is that, I mean, more than 60% of the cars, and I'm just pulling the start out of my head now, are still gasoline cars. And a lot of the industries are still very dependent on that form of unsustainable energy source. I've got a comment here which says, if you say inflation is due to COVID, shouldn't there be a management in place for for inflation, because interest rate? Okay, I'm not sure what that question is, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to explain that, you know clearly, as I said, there's a link between the availability of money and sort of the high employment rate with inflation. And the way the government, the Biden administration, and obviously indeed here in Canada, is handling that is by, they've increased interest rates, making debt a lot more difficult, a lot harder. Um, and so what that means is that, people have less money in their hands, and by so doing, that they're trying to impact inflation that way, and so bring down inflation. So hopefully I understand what the question is here. Oh, okay. So it's I guess the question is, it's been 4 years since COVID. Um, well, here's the thing: inflation does. I mean, the policies that the government has put in place in the US and indeed in Canada, a lot of what we see in terms of what the economy is saying is really backward looking. Like, if you put a policy in place from a year ago, it takes about a year for those things to become effective. And you can see in Canada, as the inflation rate continues to drop, you see that the government is starting to cut rates, and as those interest rate hikes are starting to have an impact. So I'm going to move on, because, as I said, this interview is pretty long. Next one.
Eating.
Mr. President.
Environmentally, what they're doing is killing our country. They're absolutely destroying our country. But the inflation is the thing that's hurting the black worker, the black population, and every other population within our country. Inflation is the worst it's been, I think, in over 100 years. And they'll fact check it. They'll say it's only 58. Whatever it may be, they don't add all the numbers. They don't add the really bad numbers, and you can check that too. But inflation, Harris, is absolutely destroying this country and the people in our country. Yes,
Mr.
ma'am.
President, can I ask you another question
Yes,
that is also impacting Black Americans?
And that's very clear now. Good.
I'm sorry?
It's very clear. I hear you.
Okay. So Sonia Massey, someone from Illinois, an unarmed Black woman, was shot the other day in her home by a deputy sheriff. The deputy has since been charged with murder. You've said police would get immunity from prosecution if you win. Why should someone like that officer have immunity, in your opinion?
Immunity?
Immunity.
I don't know the exact case, but I
Okay.
saw something.
So, most of us, if you're like me, you probably hadn't heard the story of Sonia Massey. So I'm going to read you a kind of a short article on what happened to a certain Sonia Massey, who was shot by police in I think it was Illinois. But one sec, I'm just going to find this article for you. Where is it now? This Okay, so this is a CNN article from July 23rd, and it's titled Illinois Police Release Body Cam Footage of a Fatal Shooting of a Black Woman in her Home. And the story goes, body cam footage showing fatal police shooting of Sonia Massey, a 36-year-old Black woman who had called 911 for help, was released Monday in a case that has led to murder charges against the deputy. The 36-minute video released via the Illinois State Police includes body camera footage from each of the two Sangamon County Sheriff deputies who responded to Massey's house after midnight on July 6th, after Massey called 911 to report a possible prowler at her home in Springfield. According to a court document filed by prosecutors, In the footage, Deputy Sean Grayson and another deputy speak calmly with Massey in her home. And when she goes to the stove to turn off a pot of boiling water, she then picks up the pot, and the other deputy steps back away from. And the other, she then picks up the pot, and the other deputy steps back away from the hot steaming pot. He says, and she says, "I rebuke you in the name of Jesus." I know it's not supposed to be funny, but that's such an African woman thing to say. But moving on. And okay, I guess the deputy also had the same response I had, and he goes, "Huh?" Anyways, and she repeats it, and she says, "I rebuke you in the name of Jesus." And the deputy Grayson goes on to say, "You better fucking not. I swear to God, I will fucking shoot you in the face." He then draws his firearm and points it at her. She ducks and says, "I'm sorry," while lifting the pot, the video shows. And both deputies yell, "Drop the fucking pot." 3 shots are heard, and after a few seconds of silence, one deputy says, "Shots fired," and calls for emergency medical services. Anyways, that's there's more in in sort of the story here, in the write up here, but this article was written by Eric Levinson, Jillian Sykes, and Brad Parks for CNN. So that was what happened in this particular case, and so hence the question to Trump about like police immunity in the line of duty. Now you're up to date, so let's proceed with
I don't know the
Trump's
exact
response.
case, but I saw something, and it didn't look good to me. It didn't look good to me. Are you talking with the water, right?
Yeah, well, police.
It didn't
I mean,
look-
police unions are not backing this person either. But again, why would?
They're going to be charging the officer? I guess they're charging the officer.
So why should he receive immunity?
Well, he might not. I mean, it depends. It depends on what happens. I'm talking about people that are much different cases than that. We need people to protect ourselves. And by the way, in Chicago, as an example, a few weeks ago, July 4th weekend, they had 117 shootings and 17 deaths. Nobody wants that. Nobody wants that. We need to have our police officers have the respect and dignity back. In this particular case, I saw something that didn't look good to me. I didn't like it. I didn't like it at all.
So can you get a little more specific back to the immunity question? Who would make those
Well, right now, for the most part.
Okay, so clearly Trump, and I think he's right to respond in the way he has, considering what he describes as his knowledge of the event. Was obviously this deputy, and you can hear from the way Trump responds that he says it doesn't look good to me, which it's obvious this was very bad, and like this deputy does need to be. I'm not going to speak on an ongoing case here, but this is very bad. I'm just going to echo what President Trump has just said. But on the broader case of whether police should have immunity, see, there's that, and this is where the problem lies, right? Because if I think I appreciate what our police do for us. They keep us safe. And obviously, it's not easy to be out there putting your life in danger. And in the face of certain events, maybe that gets them scared or something, and I mean, they should be scared because in these streets, you hear of officers getting shot in the face all the time, getting stabbed, dying, and they have a family too. Now, what I don't like is police officers responding because of internal biases. You see a black man, you're immediately on guard. You see a black woman and you're immediately on guard. And then you got to question, would this happen if that person happens to be a white person? Okay. But let's not get into the whole race debate here. My point is that considering how dangerous it is, and sort of, so assuming officers didn't get immunity, what you have is then officers being afraid to respond in the line of duty, which has in itself has a lot of fallout that we may not want as a society in terms of security, right? So in this, I actually don't think President Trump was off the mark too badly.
For the most part, people are protected by their unions, by their police unions, or by their police departments. But I'm saying if I felt, or if a group of people would feel that somebody was being unfairly prosecuted because the person did a good job maybe with crime or made a mistake, an innocent mistake. There's a big difference between being a bad person and making an innocent mistake. But if somebody made an innocent mistake, I would want to help that person.
What would those exceptions be? What would determine
You
an
go
innocent
after
mistake?
somebody and it's a very close call and it's very dangerous. And they have the policeman's life and woman is a very difficult thing because sometimes you have less than a second to make a life and death decision. And sometimes very bad decisions are made. They're not made from an evil standpoint, but they're made from the standpoint of they made a mistake.
So I want to follow up really quickly. I find it interesting because you do talk about reining in prosecutors, especially when it comes to prosecutors that are prosecuting you.
What is wrong with these people and the rude questions? That's like, oh, reining in prosecutors. What did she really have to say? Especially prosecutors that are prosecuting. Come on, like these people are so unprofessional. Anyways,
Why doesn't that skepticism apply to law enforcement?
Well, I've been prosecuted because I'm a political opponent of two people that have weaponized our justice system. I've been prosecuted. I just won the big case in Florida. Everyone said that was the biggest case. That was the most difficult case. And I just won it. Now, Biden has a similar case, except much worse. I was protected under the Presidential Records Act. Biden wasn't because he wasn't president at the time. And he had 50 years worth of documents. And they ruled that he was incompetent and therefore he shouldn't stand trial. And I said, isn't that something? He's incompetent and he can't stand trial. And yet he can be president. Isn't that nice?
Mr. President,
but they released him on the basis that he was incompetent. They said he had no memory and he was a nice old guy, but he had no memory. And therefore we're not going to prosecute him. I won the case and it got very little publicity. I didn't notice ABC doing any publicity on it, George.
Okay, so President Trump makes a great point here. And trust me, this got me curious. So I found an article for you about the facts of this particular case that President Trump actually discusses. And I personally thought like the way the courts went after President Trump in this particular over the last 2 years or so, I think that was a strategic faux pas from the Democrats, if I was being honest. But he did a lot of the things that, if not all the things that he was accused of. Again, this is just my opinion. Obviously, this is an ongoing court case. Make of that what you will. Okay, a lot of the things that, I mean, he's been convicted of felonies and all that stuff. But if we're being fair, I wanted to kind of like check out what he said about Joe Biden. So I visited a good site called PolityFact, which is I found very good for kind of like fact checking. So I'm gonna read you the abridged version here. In terms of in this particular case where Joe Biden was basically had in possession a bunch of classified government documents and why he wasn't prosecuted. So the abridged version here was Special Counsel Robert Hur, in his report on President Joe Biden's handling of classified document, didn't call Biden a criminal, nor did he say Biden was incompetent for trial or mentally unfit for office. Hur found evidence that Biden willfully retained classified documents. Hur declined to prosecute, saying a conviction was unlikely for several reasons, including that the jurors might be sympathetic. And this is very important here. Listen up. Hur declined to prosecute, saying a conviction was unlikely for several reasons, including that the jurors might be sympathetic to a well-meaning elderly man with a poor memory. Pause. So now I think if this is truly the opinion here, I think it carries on that if people actually believe that the president is incompetent and with the poor an elderly man with a poor memory in that way, and yet he is still president of the United States. Now, I'm not trying to inspire anything here, but I'm just throwing out the question right now. But that's a fact. We're gonna proceed with the interview right now.
Publicity. I didn't notice ABC doing any publicity on it, George.
We cover you extensively, sir. I'd love to move over on to
I
different
didn't notice
topics
you
now.
do any publicity on it at all. I won the case, the biggest case.
Okay, there's a lot of back and forth here. I'm gonna skip a lot of this because we're kind of running we're kind of running long, and I would really wanted this to kind of fit into a tight hour. I've got a comment here saying, "How can a well-meaning elderly man with a poor memory still be president?" That's a good question. That's a good question.
This is an attack on a political opponent. I have another one where
Sir, if you don't get to the state of the race, sir, I want to get back to the.
Yeah, so as I said earlier, I think it was kind of a strategically dumb thing for the Democrats to go after Trump in the way they have, just because, I mean, up until Kamala came into the race, they were for sure going to lose with Biden on the ticket. Here's the thing, because I mean, you take away the fact that Biden wasn't what, especially it showed in that debate, he wasn't all there, but also they turned Trump into in some sort of like religious figure, where people that people could worship. They turned him into a martyr, which I thought was so dumb. To be fair, when you think about it, Donald Trump is doing the exact same thing with Kamala right now, which again, I don't know why they do these things, but in saying things like questioning things like a race and all those things, I think that will count against him, because for sure there's a lot of people that are going to look at it and go, this is not the guy I want to vote for. But anyways.
Campaign. Senator J.D. Vance is your running mate. He's had a lot of controversy lately, and I want to read you a few things that he has said in the past. He said the Democrats running the country are a bunch of childless cat ladies who are miserable at their own lives and the choices they've made. And so they want to make the rest of the country miserable too. He's not talking here about how great it is to be a parent. He's attacking what he says are the choices people are making to not have children.
Let's say that you and I traded businesses.
All right.
How many appointments would I?
YouTube decided to hit me with an idea. I think JT Vance has been probably a horrible VP pick. Not gonna lie, like I didn't know the guy before he became the VP pick, but there's so much dirt on this guy, including comments from a little while ago that are relevant here, where he describes a lot of the, I guess, Nancy Pelosi and some of the women that were against what he was prescribing at the time, called them childless cat ladies. Basically saying, why should we listen to them, because they have no stake in the future of the country anyways. Yeah, that I don't think that was very smart. So unfortunately, he has become a sag on, and he has become a stick to beat Trump with, unfortunately. Anyways,
get per month?
Let's see if we can
15,
get through
20.
this YouTube ad.
Did you know that he had these views about people who do not have children before you picked him to be your running mate? And do you agree with him?
No, I know this. He is very family oriented, and he thinks family is a great thing. That doesn't mean he thinks that if you don't have a family, it's not. I know people with families. I know people with great families. I know people with very troubled families. And I also know people with no families. They didn't meet the right person. Things happen. You go through life, you don't meet the right person.
He's not just talking about families here.
And
he also
some of
says that
those
people that don't have children should get less votes than
That's
those
all right.
that do.
I'm just speaking for myself.
Is that your
and I
campaign
think
position?
I'm speaking for him too. He strongly believes in family, but I know people with great families. I know people with not great families that don't have a family. And the people without the family are far better. They're superior in many cases, okay? He's not saying they're not. What he's saying is that he thinks the family experience is a very important thing. It's a very good thing. But that doesn't mean that if you grow up and you grow older and you don't meet somebody that would be wonderful to meet and would have been good, that's a bad thing. He's not saying that. My interpretation, you'll have to ask him actually, but My interpretation is he's strongly family-oriented, but that doesn't mean if you don't have a family, there's something wrong with it.
Just
Mr.
one last
President?
point, and then we'll move on. Just one of the bedrock principles of American life is one person, one vote. Senator J.D. Vance has suggested that someone who has children should have more votes than a person who does not have children. I just want to be clear here. Is that the position of your campaign?
Well, no, but it's not something I have ever heard before. I can tell you this. Right now, you have illegal aliens coming into our country, many from prisons and many from mental institutions, and they want to give them votes. I don't think they should have votes. They came into our country illegally,
People
and
who
they're
are only
taking the
American
vote away
citizens
from
are
all
allowed
of the
to vote,
people
sir.
in this room that have been here a long time, that have worked hard, that in many cases, and you'll see this happening, if I'm not elected, you're going to see it happening. If I am, you're not going to have any problem. But you're going to see it happening a long time. You're going to see the people in this room and people outside of this room are going to be losing their jobs to people that have come into this country illegally.
Mr. President, can we stay with just kind of the state of the race right now? Because I felt like that vice president question, candidate question was right in there with that. So let's talk about J.D. Vance for a little bit. He's had some stumbles out of the gate. I don't know if you're hearing what we hear as reporters, but it's been a tough couple of weeks for him. Why did you choose J.D. Vance?
Why
did you choose him? And I'm having a hard time hearing too.
I chose
know
him
everybody out
because-
there can, but it's
I'll
hard.
tell you why. I chose him because he's a very strong believer in work and the working man and woman, and especially the working man and woman who have been treated very unfairly, because you have many of them in this room. But you have many of those people, they were treated very unfairly. They worked very hard and they were treated unfairly. He wrote the book that became a bestseller. The movie became a smash hit. He's a very smart guy without the benefit of having a family that has contacts, like a father that was well connected. He got into Yale Law School. He graduated in 2 years from Ohio State, summa cum laude. I mean, you take a look at, his career has been an amazing career. He started off at a level with a difficult family situation, very difficult with the mother and the father and everything else. He ends up going to Yale Law School and was one of the top students, became the head of the law journal. I mean, that's an amazing thing. He's a 4-year, he was in the military with great distinction for 4 years, got out, went into business, became successful in business, very successful in business, actually. Did public offerings and other things. And I have to believe in that. I mean, he's somebody that was born in a rough situation. Most of the people know that situation because it was very well documented in his book. And I have a lot of respect for somebody that can get into Yale and become one of the best students in Yale, that meets a young woman at Yale who was also outstanding, and they get married, they have a beautiful family. But he had he's made himself an amazing life. He then goes to Ohio, lives in Ohio, and he had my endorsement. That helped. But he wins the Senate. He becomes a United States Senator.
Okay. So, I mean, that was a lot of hazing of risen up of J.D. Vance. I still think he should have been smarter with some of the stuff he's put out there. And as I said, unfortunately, he has become a stick to flog Donald Trump with. Anyways.
The United States Senator.
So,
so Harris, like I respect you for your success, I respect people for
thank
their success.
the reason I asked the question is because the last time you and I sat and talked was the day that you were shot. We've been together for much of that day. You left to go to Butler, Pennsylvania, and we didn't know what was next.
Yeah.
And 2 days after that,
I cannot understand your microphone.
I know,
is
it is.
in lousy shape, but I cannot understand.
So,
Okay.
because I
The
asked
mic was
you
a
who
problem
you
throughout
wanted to
this interview,
choose for
so-
vice president.
Yeah.
And you said normally it really wouldn't matter what they would bring. You choose somebody that you think has a future, that sort of thing. But you said these words 3.5 hours before an attempted assassination on your life. You told me that bad things happen, Harris, and that's why this decision is important this time. Bad things happen. You said it twice. When you look at J.D. Vance, is he ready on day one?
Does he what?
Ready on day one, if he has to be.
I've always had great respect for him, and for the other candidates too. But I will say this, and I think this is well documented, historically, the vice president, in terms of the election, does not have any impact. I mean, virtually no impact. You have 2 or 3 days where there's a lot of commotion as to who, like you're having it on the Democrat side, who it's going to be. And then that dies down, and it's all about the presidential pick. Virtually never has it mattered. Maybe Lyndon Johnson mattered for different reasons of what we're talking about, not for vote reasons, but for political reasons, other political reasons.
Okay, so and factually, President Trump is right here. Typically, the VP pick doesn't matter too much, apart from obviously the exception of Lyndon B. Johnson that President Trump just mentioned. Um, and so, but I think that in this particular election, the VP pick is very important, especially and I've been on record to say, especially on the Democrat side, I think it's very important just because of the perception of the diversities that Kamala Harris brings. I think the Democrats definitely need someone to balance out that ticket. Now, in the case of the Republicans, I don't see that as being as important because Trump is such an all-consuming figure in sort of the way he handles his business, so to speak. Moving on.
Historically, the choice of a vice president makes no difference. You're voting for the president, and you can have a vice president who's outstanding in every way, and I think JD is. I think that all of them would have been, but you're not voting that way. You're voting for the president. You're voting for me. If you like me, I'm going to win. If you don't like me, I'm not going to win.
I'm going to get my JD Vance question in.
Okay, I'm gonna skip the JD more questions on JD Vance here because I don't think it adds any value to the discussion we're trying to have.
I'm going to get my JD Vance. Do you think? Well, I mean, my point
at
is
least
here.
It was said in a friendly manner.
My point is. Do you think the Republican Party is getting a little bit too judgy about people's lives when you think about abortion or when you think about what JD Vance is saying?
I don't think, look, I think that the Democrat Party is really the one that has the problem. I think they're radical on abortion because they're allowing abortion in the ninth month.
I like the discussion here because there's a bit of clarity that needs to be brought to the abortion discussion. So
they're allowing the death.
I think it's
they're allowing
freedom,
the
right?
death of a baby after the baby is born, based on
Sir, that's
governor of
illegal in
Virginia.
every state in the country.
Based on the governor of Virginia,
Executing a
they're
baby
allowing
in
the
every
death
state
of
in
the
the country
baby
is illegal.
after it's born.
It's
They're
a crime.
allowing abortions in the 8th and 9th month.
Well, Democrats have denied.
I think they're right. And I think the Republican Party is actually much less. I think I've made them much less radical, perhaps. But the Republican Party, what we're doing is bringing it back to the states where everybody wanted it. Democrats, Republicans, liberals, conservatives, everybody wanted abortion brought back. They didn't want Roe v. Wade in the federal government. They wanted it. Everybody.
But the majority of Americans opposed Roe v. Wade.
Okay, so flashback. Donald Trump, obviously during his time in office, facilitated the overturning of Roe v. Wade. And what does that mean? That took the sort of the federally recognized abortion rights of women, so women's choice to make the decision on whether to have an abortion or not throughout the abortion process, so to speak, and put that into the hands of the states. So state by state, they could decide. So if you're maybe in the South where people are a bit more religious, they might choose to pass a law where you can't have abortions, right? And what that does is that women in those particular regions then have to maybe sometimes travel to essentially a different state that will allow that in order to access abortion rights. And obviously this has been a sore spot for a lot of women, but there's more to say on this, but I'll let the interview go further though.
They don't know about this. Right now they're voting. It brought it back to the states. Now, I happen to believe in the 3 exceptions. Ronald Reagan believed with rape, incest, life of the mother. I do. I think.
Okay, so a lot of people think that obviously the conclusion from the Democrats like to say that Donald Trump is outrightly against abortion, but you can hear he clearly says here in cases of rape, in the cases of incest and life of the mother, he does say that he is open to abortion. But something I wanted to hit real quick was Donald Trump basically saying states like Virginia, where abortion rights are to the extreme, where they allow abortion even up to the 9th month, even after the baby is born. For then they kind of set the baby aside and make a decision. He says that during the debate. So I wanted to find out if this was fact or not. So I headed back to PolitiFact, by the way, my favorite, at the moment, my favorite site kind of doing research for this. So this is an article by Louis Jacobson and Samantha Putterman from April 8th. So are you able to execute babies willy-nilly? Well, here's the fact. Willfully terminating a newborn's life is illegal in every state. Situations resulting in fetal death in the 3rd trimester are exceedingly rare, involving fetal anomalies or life-threatening medical emergencies affecting the mother. For fetuses with short life expectancies, doctors may induce labor and offer palliative care to make the newborn as comfortable as possible. Some families choose this option when facing diagnoses that limit the baby's post-birth survival to just minutes or days after delivery. Okay, so obviously, it again, I think there's a bit of an exaggeration there to what Roe v. Wade implies, and on this, there's certainly a chance that people take advantage of Roe v. Wade and go to the extremes in terms of aborting, or I guess take advantage of the system. Let's leave it at that, right? But I think obviously as I've read here, it is illegal to just basically choose to take the life of a child. That is killing, right?
I think most people do. I think most Republicans do also. But if you take a look, right now it's an amazing thing. Out of the federal government, it's in states, and people are voting. And I will say, Ohio is, let's call it a more liberal version, has been approved. Kansas, the same thing, a little bit surprising to a lot of people. But the people are now voting, and it's taking this issue that's been going on for 52 years and has torn our country apart, and it's giving it to the people to vote on. And they're voting. And many states have already voted. Others are in the process of voting. And it's bringing it back to the people and a vote of the people. And it's not at all radical. And again, you have to follow your heart. I happen to believe in the 3 exceptions. Most people believe in the 3 exceptions. Most Republicans believe in the exceptions. But they don't want to see an abortion in the 9th month or the 8th month. Almost everybody agrees to that. And they certainly don't want to see, in the case of the governor of Virginia, the former governor, I might add, who said, we set the baby aside and then we decide what to do. Meaning, what do? We execute the baby. That's a radical, horrible.
All right. Most of this we've addressed. So I'm going to kind of fast forward a little bit because we're running short on time.
And some people want that. I don't want it. Most people don't.
Thank you. I'm being all the time. But if you win, you'll still be president at 82, which is older than Biden is right now.
But not mentally. Look, mentally.
Listen, here's the question.
He's shot. But most people.
Would you consider?
Most people. I know many people in their 80s and their 90s that are in great shape. Some of our greatest leaders. You look at throughout the world history, the greatest leaders, some of the greatest leaders in the world were in their 80s.
But here's the question. Would you consider stepping down if you felt that your health was declining? Or would you?
Oh, absolutely.
And who would
I think I'd know.
How would you make that decision?
I think I'd know. Look, if I came onto a stage like this and I got treated so rudely as this woman treated
Oh my goodness.
me, and I'm fine with it because she was very rude, sir. Very rude. That wasn't a question. She
Sorry,
didn't ask
you
me
can
a
answer the
question.
question.
She gave a statement. That wasn't a question.
I repeated your statement, sir, actually. You said you would. You would.
Oh,
make that
absolutely.
decision
If I
to step
thought
down.
that I was failing in some way, I want people to be sharp. I'll go a step further. I want anybody running for president to take an aptitude test, to take a cognitive test. I think it's a great idea. And I took 2 of them and I aced them.
Well,
I took 2 of them. But let me ask you.
Yeah.
I would like to have people running for president. And I don't mean because they're 75 or 85. I think anybody running, I'd like to do it. People say it's not constitutional. I would like to have something passed where you can do it. I think we should know. I mean, I've watched what's happened in the last couple of years under this gentleman, and our country is a mess. We have inflation. We have the millions of people falling in. We have Afghanistan, which was the worst, most embarrassing moment in the history of our country. What he has done to our country, and her too, what they've done to our country. She has been a horrible vice president. She's considered the worst vice president in the history of our country.
Mr. President,
Okay, so what President Trump is, former President Trump said here, I think is perfectly valid. I think that things should never, especially in the Biden candidacy, presidential candidacy, things should never have gotten to that stage where it was publicly showing decline before the people were made aware. And obviously, the comment here from Braveheart is basically saying, I support the cognitive test in every country. I think that's a valid point. I think while he's right, President Trump is right to say that a lot of the leaders in the world are people that are older in age, and obviously that it takes time for a new generation to take over, and a lot of times it's hard to kind of take power from these old heads, so to speak. But yeah, a cognitive test is definitely important, but obviously it's unconstitutional, according to what President Trump has said here, in terms of like having your cognitive test in public and all of that. But I think that genuinely should be a law. Okay, I think that should be put into the Constitution. Moving on.
Taking the cognitive test.
Mr. President,
I would love to
And
do
make
it.
it public.
Well, I've already taken 2 of them, but I'll do it again.
Mr.
I
President,
suggest
how do you
All right,
intend-
this is just a whole bunch of arguing over.
that let's pass the cognitive test.
Miss-
She
All
would
right.
pass it, and she didn't think she was going to have it pass it. Give me the facts.
To be clear,
Okay.
you don't think
I'm
yours
just
How do you
giving the
intend
facts. She
and
didn't pass her bar exam, and she didn't think she would pass it, and she didn't think she was going to have it pass it.
All right, sorry. So I know I fast forwarded a bit too far, but I'll tell you the gist of the tale here. President Trump basically says that Kamala is not very smart. Basically, he says basically that she failed her bar exam, and this was something I wanted to confirm because I thought it was just a Trump jab. And it is true, she did fail her bar exam in the first try, but obviously she has gone on to become a great attorney and gone on to achieve so much in her career, so much so that she's the vice president of the USA. So while I think it's an unnecessary jab, but this is actually true. But that doesn't. I mean, people fail the law exam, the call to bar exam all the time, and I don't think it's, as I said, it's a very unnecessary job. But this is Donald here.
And I don't know what happened. Maybe she passed it.
She did pass it.
There's a
She
man
did-
over
she
here.
did
I
in
think
fact
he
pass
must
it.
work for
Mr.
her.
President, I would love to ask you about January 6th. You called yourself the candidate of law and order. When Time Magazine asked you if you would consider pardoning all the rioters, you said, yes, absolutely.
Sure.
You called them patriots. 140 police officers were assaulted that day. Their injuries included broken bones. At least one officer lost an eye. One had 2 cracked ribs, 2 smashed spinal discs. Another had a stroke. Were the people who assaulted those 140 officers, including those I just mentioned, patriots who deserve pardons?
Well, let me bring it back to modern day. Like about 5 days ago, we had an attack on the Capitol, a horrible
God.
attack on the Capitol. You saw the people that were protesting and spraying these incredible monuments, bells, lions, all these magnificent limestone and granite with red paint, red spray paint that will never actually come off, especially on the limestone.
Okay, so for those of you who are not really understanding what President Trump is referring to there, obviously you guys know about J6, which was the fallout after President Trump was announced to have lost the presidential election in 2020. But what a lot of you might not know was about the protest, which President Trump is referring to now, which took place 5 days ago, was a pro-Palestinian protest against because President Netanyahu, so the president of Israel, was in Washington D.C. having some diplomatic conversations, so to speak. And obviously, these pro-Palestinian protesters, in their protests, deface certain monuments in Washington D.C. And he's asking the question: if the people from J6 are being, prosecuted as they have been, why not these people who are defacing monuments? What's so different? Officers died that day, no office, and President Trump goes on to say no police officers actually died on J6, while there was a lot of damage and stuff like that. But in contrast, from this 5 days ago or something, he says that an officer actually died. So he says that why is the punishment not the same?
Well, never. I'm a builder. I know about this stuff. It'll never. You'll see it in 100 years from now. They viciously attacked our government. They fought with police. They fought with them much more openly than I saw on January 6th. What's going to happen to those people? What's going to happen to the people in Portland that destroyed
But sir, my
that
question
city?
is on those.
What's going to happen to
my
the
question
people
is
that
on
tried
those
to bring
rioters
it?
who assaulted
Excuse me.
officers.
You have to
Would you pardon
What's
those
going to
people?
happen? Oh, absolutely, I would.
You
If
would
they're
pardon
innocent,
those-
If they're innocent, I would pardon them.
They've been convicted.
And by the way, the Supreme Court just well, they were convicted by a very tough system. How come the people that try?
Okay, so clearly, President Trump is saying he would pardon the people from J6. And I'm not saying that I personally don't think that is right as well. But clearly, he's also right to make a call on the selective prosecution, so to speak, because if the people on J6 deserve prosecution, then certainly the people who have defaced property and attacked police do deserve prosecution. But here's a fact, though. There have in fact been arrests of 14 of those demonstrators, including a 15-year-old boy who assaulted an officer. So that's not to say there's not been any repercussions for these people. There have been repercussions, maybe not yet to the severity of what happened on J6.
To burn down Minneapolis. How come the people that took over a large percentage of Seattle, how come nothing happened to them? How come the people
sir, we're talking about
how
people
come
that
the
were
people-
seen
No, no,
beating
no. We're
officers
talking
with
about
flag
federal
poles,
buildings.
dragging them down the stairs. They're on
They
video.
try-
Have you seen that
Really?
video,
Oh,
sir?
really? Well, they
You
shot.
would pardon those?
This reporter, as I said, I really think that she shouldn't be in the job after this performance. It's almost like she, as I said, it sounded and looked like she just had an agenda. She wasn't there for any journalistic integrity, it looks like, whatsoever. And I think this was terrible. This is a terrible show for mainstream media.
You would pardon those rioters?
They shot a young lady in the face who was protesting. They shot her in the face. Nobody died that day. You do know that. But
yeah, the main point that President Trump is making here is you can't have two systems of justice, and he's perfectly right. So, there's not much for us to add there. I'm going to skip to the next part of this.
People died in Seattle. Nobody died. Tell you what. What about the cops that were? But you have people from Minneapolis. You have people just DC 5 days ago, and nothing. They're going to win our cases, and we're going to be vindicated. But I'll tell you, they went after me as a political opponent. That's never happened in our country before. I do two things, because I can do a lot of things simultaneously. I close the border, and it's such a terrible, terrible precedent.
What do you do on day one if you
Final
win?
question.
What's
I like
your first
it.
thing?
All right.
What do? I close the border, and I do two things, because I can do a lot of things simultaneously. I close the border. We don't want people coming. We want people to come in, Harris, but they have to be vetted. They have to be checked.
I think President Trump actually did a good job on this, because a lot of people like to say President Trump is anti-immigration. Clearly, he isn't. Clearly, he says, he does not want illegal, unvetted immigrants. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. So let's so what's the second thing President Trump
To
will
come
do?
in legally. We want
Legal,
people. I want
yeah.
people to come into our country, but they have to be vetted. They have to be checked. So when you say, what do I do? That, and I drill, baby, drill. I bring energy way down. I bring interest rates down. I bring inflation way down, so people can buy bacon again, so people can buy a ham sandwich again, so that people can go to a restaurant and afford it. Because right now, people can't buy food. Your grocery bills are up 40, 50, 60%, right? She's agreeing to me. Oh, she's agreeing. Thank you. I like you very much.
All right, thank you. I like you very much. So bring immigration, close the border, and drill baby drill to bring prices down. Those have obviously been that's not new on the Trump platform. Um, in terms of drill baby drill, personally, and this is just my opinion here. Um, I think that President Trump needs to figure out how to answer the question of climate change. And I don't think the right answer is to deny climate change as he's done in the past. But on the case of drill baby drill, he's basically advocating for the US to continue to explore a resource that they have available, because China is not going to have the same conscience that the US has, is basically his point, right? And I think that's a fair point, but I think the US taking a leadership in climate change, in policies, and I don't think the US just going willy-nilly drilling and going and sort of continually pushing fossil fuels is the way in general for the world to go. Anyways, so that was a very interesting interview. As I told you, I wasn't really a fan of the sort of the biased journalism there, but we got quite a bit out of there. And I hope that with this discussion you probably got a lot more out of the interview than the mainstream media showed you, because I'm sure all you saw at post interview was a lot of talk about Trump being racist, and while he did say things that, yes, are very ill advised and ill thought out, he does make some valid points in terms of controlling immigration, in terms of trying to control inflation. He does make some valid calls in terms of the justice system being balanced for everybody, in terms of advocating cognitive tests for people aspiring to be president. Okay, he does make some valid calls. Okay, anyways, so that brings us to the end of the interview. Obviously I'll be doing a lot more of these as more as more as some of these candidates give more press conferences. If you're new around here, don't forget to subscribe. It helps other people find my content. And thank you very much for tuning in today. See you on the next one. Bye, guys.